Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Crisis Victory Show. My name is Dr. Hal Bradley. I'm one of the executive producers and your host today. I'd like to do a shout out to Pete Turner of the Break It Down Show. He is also an executive producer and creator of the show with me. Hey, Pete, how you doing, buddy?
I'm great. You guys have a great time.
Yeah, thanks, man. Uh, Today, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be a very unique interview that we're doing. I'm a former convict. I did time in the 80s in Folsom Prison, California. Richard is a former corrections officer that was working in Corcoran, right, Richard?
Corcoran, yeah.
Yeah, Corcoran. Yeah, I remember coming through the Sallyport doing an overnight there in that place, and I couldn't have been happier to get up to Folsom, man. That looked pretty hardcore. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, this is Richard Caruso, and he was a corrections officer, and I believe was it the 90s, Richard?
Late 80s, early 90s, and then I retired in right before 2000.
Yeah, my God. I also want to say at this point in time how unique this is that a convict and a corrections officer are sharing an interview together on a show. And I also want to extend to you my personal great respect for you. I understand you were a straight up CO. You understand how those of us that are going through our time and all we want to do basically is get back to the world. We don't want to run into a bunch of conflict, although conflict always arises in those higher security prisons, as we both well know. And I'm so excited to do this interview today, Richard, because I know that I have an audience that will have a lot of questions and thoughts concerning just exactly what a medium high to high security prison system is like, not only for the inmate, but also for the corrections officer. So with that being said, I'd like to start out by asking you how you're doing and what are you doing with your life currently since your retirement?
Well, I'm currently waiting on this monster storm off the coast of Florida. I'm down in Sarasota, Bradenton, and it's supposed to hit this evening. Um, Dr. Hale, I would like I know this is your show, but your story and your background is very interesting also. And when my people see it, they're not going to be kind of privy to it. So if you could start out basically telling me a little bit about yourself so they know the person that's sitting there interviewing me, because I want them to give you your due respect also.
I thank you for that, Richard. And I kind of agree. I think that it fits into the format of what we're trying to accomplish here today. Uh, as most of you out there that have been viewing my shows know, this is a sin to redemption program. Shows people that have lived in a very high caliber, risky lifestyle and came out in a humanitarian scale on the other end. And briefly and basically, Richard, I was in 1969, I got kicked out of school in Edmonds, Washington for smoking a cigarette. Back in those years, you were kicked out for half a year. And my mother had a friend that owned a mining corporation on the Durango-Zacatecas border in central Mexico. And they thought it would be a life-changing experience to send me down for the semester. And ultimately, that worked out to over a year. But when I got to the village and I ended up in the village, not one person spoke English. I'd never even heard Spanish spoken before. It was very overwhelming for a 15-year-old kid to be introduced into that environment at that time. I had a bodyguard that was assigned to me when I got into country. One of the owners of the corporation, the Anaconda de Mexico Mining Corporation, had knew the dangers and the perils of that environment back in 1969, so they arranged for my protection. What he failed to protect me from was the involvement of the organized crime family that controlled that particular area of Mexico during those years, later becoming a cartel family. During the first couple of months I was there, I was starting to kind of adjust into the village. I'm blonde-haired, blue-eyed, something they'd never seen in the village of about 200 people. And everybody treated me with so much love and openness, and I was allowed in every one of the homes. And we're talking a village of about 200, like I just said. And these are adobe houses. These were very, very impoverished people. They were peasants. And like on the weekends, we would all bathe together in the same pool. The women would cook up these great meals. The men would be playing guitars and mariachi and singing. And it was just a really amazing environment. And I was in country about 3 months when I witnessed my first execution. We were up in the cafeteria and I was sitting at the table with Memo, my bodyguard, and a man came into the cafeteria and the table seated next to me, he walked up to the guy, put a gun to the back of his head, and blew his brains out right in front of me. Now, bear in mind, I'm 15 years old. The worst thing I'd ever seen as a trauma experience, Richard, was fistfights, stuff that normal kids go through. So suffice to say, Memo took me outside of the cafeteria and he says, whatever you see down here, whatever you experience down here, it stays down here for good. You don't talk about this stuff up in the States. And he was starting to acclimate me, if you will, to the extremity of the culture that a young 15-year-old kid who had never seen the world at all was just now indoctrinated into. Over the course of time that I was down there, I had my own burro for transportation that knew all, and I would ride alongside the poppy fields where they were harvesting opium for production of heroin. The Chouari Indians were marijuana growers up in the mountains, and over the course of the first few months, they finally got relaxed enough, if you will, to kind of, bring me into their culture, bring me into their circle. I remember those that were out there slicing the poppy bulbs and harvesting the sap. Within a couple months, they would wave at me and they'd smile. They'd share a lunch with me. They started becoming more used to seeing this little gabacho, this gringo, in their territory, if you will. The Chouaris, the same thing. Ultimately, I got invited up into their village encampments, and they would take like corn husks off of a ear of corn and they would fill it full of marijuana and they'd roll these gigantic, whatever you want to call them. And at nighttime, they would sit around and pass this around. And, you're talking 1969. We were at that time in history, we were all smoking pot by then and taking LSD trips, doing all the stuff that the kids did in the 60s. So it was really fascinating to me. But they said, aquí en su corazón vive la sangre de la ciudad. In your heart will always pump the blood of this village. And they said, someday come back to us. So I just got word my brother had been wounded in action in Vietnam. So I headed back up to the United States, and he was in the Bremerton Naval Hospital. And I remember going on the ward and just scared to death that I may never see my brother again. And when I was on that ward, Richard, I was looking at all these young men who had various combat-related injuries, and it really made me angry, really, really mad. And I decided right then and there at the age of 16 that I was going to go in the United States Army and fight for my country and try to respect and honor what they had gone through. So 2 weeks after I was 17, I had already taken my oath about a week before I was 17. And 2 weeks after, I was in Fort Knox, Kentucky. This is November of 1971. I was airborne qualified. I became a paratrooper before I was even 18 years old. So I was in Tigerland in Fort Polk, Louisiana, going through an extensive training program, which Congress stepped in after our cycle from February to April of 72. It was so intensive. We did prisoner of war camp training, which later in my life served. We did jungle survival. We were really put through a rigorous training. And there was a movie about 1972 in Fort Polk and Tigerland and all of that kind of explained it. Anyway, I was stationed overseas in Germany. I didn't go to Vietnam. I went to Europe instead, did my time and ETS'd out in March of 74 and immediately moved up to Sacramento, got on the GI Bill and decided to go to college. Well, that fall or winter came, and this is December or January of 75. And I decided to go down to the village during my 2-week break and visit my friends down there. And when I got there, this one kid whose father controlled the crime syndicate of that region, he had befriended me when I was living there as a kid. And he says, listen, I want you to bring a car back. We'll take this car and we'll cut in some compartments and we can start running some marijuana north. And well, they convinced me to do it. So I turned around and got back up to the States. And a few months later, got down there with a big old car. And we were able to have their chop shop cut in these compartments to where I could compact 80 kilos of marijuana. And after my first run, I remember hitting Nogales and they taught me to spray deodorant on my exposed skin, wear sunglasses that weren't too dark or too light, look directly into the officer's eyes and answer all of his questions calmly. And sure enough, got through no problem and immediately became addicted to the rush of becoming a smuggler. So that went on for about 5, maybe 6 years, where I was running loads and recruited some other guys and had 2 other cars going down at a time with me. And boy, I mean, we just went from being poor students to overnight success in this magical world of marijuana smuggling. Um, Around 1979, the market changed. Um, the Caribbean activity for the Medellin drug cartel moving cocaine through there got hampered when Griselda was grabbed, snapped off in Southern California. And that opened up the door for Cali. But the people I was associated with in Sinaloa and Jalisco State were already embedded, if you will, with the Medellin drug cartel and Pablo Escobar. So we switched overnight from hugs and handshakes to everybody having automatic weapons and examples being made. The violence escalated instantaneously. I've witnessed multiple executions in country down there, and was really put through a whole different training cycle, if you will. But I got up stateside, started developing the markets all the way up through Seattle, Vancouver, into Alaska. And at one point, I was moving 250 to 350 kilos of cocaine a month. Now, you've worked in California State Department of Corrections. You know they don't get many players of that magnitude in that environment. We usually go federal, when we're caught like that. But fortunately or unfortunately, it may have, in 84, I got hit at my house. I wasn't home when they hit it, but they only found a few hundred grams of cocaine, but they left all the paperwork in the coffee table, search warrant copies, seizure copies, things to this nature. And I went, oh my God, I'm going to go away for the rest of my life, because in the attic of the garage, I had a whole lot of kilos of there. And that's what I thought initially they had snapped off. But like I said, they only found a couple hundred grams, but that was enough to get me sentenced to 3 years in the California state prison system. So I ended up in NRC Vacaville. Are you familiar with that? Vacaville?
Yeah, I worked Vacaville and Solano.
Yeah, I was. Oh, yeah, I was in Solana. We were the first cycle through. So the year I was in there. Yeah, I was in Vacaville, and at that time Charlie Manson was there, and I met him in the infirmary, and he was throwing karate chops, and he had 4 guards around him, and oh my God, what a nutcase!
I took care of him for 6 years in Corcoran.
Did you really?
Yeah.
He was an interesting person, but right away what they did, I was on Greenside, and right away they needed to fill up Solano. They had just opened it. So I got transferred over to Solano, waiting for my transfers to the other prisons I was going to end up in. I went down to San Luis Obispo from there, and I got slapped with the gang affiliation. I had a friend of mine from the Sinaloa cartel had come up stateside to visit me. They tagged him, ID'd him, bang, I was off to Folsom Prison. So I go through the Westgate Sallyport at Folsom, East Tower is where the armory is, and all of the exit gate when you leave the prison. I go through there, and right away we have a clerk up there that's signaling to a guy that was on the bus with us. And this guy was a convicted sex offender. Now you're talking about early 1980s, and you know as well as I do what happens to sex offenders when they hit the yard. So the Peckerwoods, the Northern California Peckerwoods, which I have tattooed on my chest, by the way, they pointed to the guy, and they told me and this other white dude that we needed to make sure that he didn't stay on the yard. And their message that day was, you either go to SHU or you're not going to make it. And they give them that one day. And sure enough, the next day, I ended up jumping on this guy's back with a ice pick type of weapon, if you will. And they said I stabbed him 32 times. I hit him in the neck and shoulder, but he didn't die. He got taken into the number 1 building and number 2 building, which was B building, which was where I was at. And,
when you walked into Folsom, did you feel the presence of the MA, the Mexican Mafia, or the Aryan Brotherhood?
Big time. I'm going to get to that, Richard. This is going to blow your mind, because this is very unique. You're a former guard. You know how everything is racial, everything is organized crime families, and everything is ran and controlled by La Emmy, the Black Guerrilla family, the Aryan Brotherhood, the NorCal Peckerwoods were who I kind of clicked up with when I was in Folsom. But anyway, what happened was a message was sent in to La Emmy saying, this is a respected and trusted brother of ours, this Peckerwood. We need you to make sure that he gets through it okay. Nothing happens to him. And think of how unique that is, Richard, being a prison guard, having the Emmy protecting a white boy, and explaining to the Aryan nation just exactly who I was to them. So it put me in a really unique scenario where I was able to kind of be like a go-between between the two organizations based on the level and the power that I had brought into the prison with me. By then, I had already been about 6 years working for Sinaloa. So I was very deeply connected. And they were also the providers and suppliers for a lot of La ME, La Familia. You know, you had the SURS, you had the Norteños, but everybody fell under La ME. They were the controlling organization.
Did you ever run into Joe Morgan or any of the hierarchy?
You know, it's been so long ago. And after that, I went to Leavenworth in federal prison. So I can't say that I did, but I would be surprised if I didn't. If they were on the yard in the mid to late 80s in Folsom Prison, you're damn right I ran into them. I was out. I worked for, do you remember Tom Hickey, the guy that shot all the inmates there in Folsom Prison? The guard tower guy? He became real famous for it. Anyway, they took him out of the tower and put him in maintenance, and I worked for him in the maintenance department. Mm-hmm. And he had, and Richard, he had this belt buckle that had 13 bullet casings that were soldered off and melted onto the belt buckle. That's how many shots he fired into the yard that day when they decided to more or less retire him out of the tower. But getting back to the time in Folsom, because of the stabbing that I did, I had to go do 8 months in the SHU program. And it's my understanding, Richard, that you worked in SHU, correct?
Yeah, I activated Corcoran SHU, and you're the perfect person to talk about this. Is that a lot of people that hear my story, they ask me, well, you know, if someone gets rolled up on the main line and they go into the SHU, why do they have to conform to the SHU? Why do they have to go out there and fight? And that was the situation you were kind of into, where you're getting ready to roll up into a whole nother world.
Yeah, it was you got to realize I'd never even been in jail in my life. And bang, within the first 7-8 months, I ended up in the California State Prison System. I'm up in Folsom. And it's the 1980s, brother. I mean, they're rolling up the Crips, the Bloods, everybody out of LA. They're packing them up there. And Chino was overflowed with all the gangs, so they were transferring them up. Oh, my God, it was just insane. And I'd never seen nothing like it. And it was very hostile, very violent. But SHU was altogether different. I mean, my God. How do you describe SHU to someone that's never been in the security housing unit program as a convict? Because you're tested the second you walk in that fucking place. And I remember when we got the yard, you get 1 hour out of 23 a day in a very small confined area. It wasn't like what you were dealing with down in Corcoran, because the tower guards that were in there that secured the SHU yard, man, we weren't even allowed to talk to the Latinos. We weren't allowed to talk to the Mayates or the blacks. Excuse me, black people. I'm not prejudiced, but it's prison language, Richard. You know. But,
I know it well. I know it well.
Now, I watched that movie Felon, and
right.
That gives a pretty good summation of what you were dealing with. And I'm just so curious to hear from you about that today, because
I want to get to the fact that, and then we'll go into my story a little bit. I'm not trying to guide this, but you're such an interesting man. And I want you to tell the viewers, my viewers, of you were so deeply entrenched in the cartel that at one point you said, I've had enough of this, and you walked into that federal prosecutor's office.
I did indeed. That was in the fall of 1993. I exited Folsom Prison in August of 89, relocated up to Washington State, and tried to sever the ties with the Sinaloa drug cartel. Unfortunately, they routed me out within months. Sent me an envelope with a whole bunch of money in it, 2 plane tickets down to Las Vegas, Nevada, put me up in a real nice hotel there. A compadre of mine from Mexico had come up, and he says, well, look, you know, you're not going to walk away from this. They're not going to let you walk away from this. And the reason, Richard, that they're that way is because I grew up with them. You know, I knew El Chapo, and I actually sent a picture of me and El Chapo to another interview I did 41 years ago, when Chapo was over in Jalisco with Rafael Cara Quintero doing the marijuana business. And at that time, Chapo wasn't some big drug lord or nothing. And I knew him pretty good. You know, we'd see each other from time to time when I got down there. But anyway, that's the type of people that I was involved with. I had knowledge of these people, and thereby by having that type of knowledge, there's really only one other way out of that industry. So reluctantly, I agreed to go ahead and reestablish everything back up in the Pacific Northwest. And I think it was 93. Yeah. I had a load of kilos snapped off in Seattle. The guy had just left my house, and he bought 40 kilos that day, picking up the other 40 the next day. It was a $1.5 million deal, a standard regular deal for me. And he got snapped off by DEA. But what killed us was as soon as they thought they were getting like 2 or 3 kilos, they had no idea the amount of weight that I was funneling through there at that time. And these kilos had the soccer ball symbol on them, which is the trademark of Pablo Escobar, the Medellin drug cartel. That instant, they initiated, they got a hold of the State Department, said, we've got an Escobar associate in the Pacific Northwest. And that's when Operation Northern Exposure was formed. And they spent a couple years going after me before I made the choice to walk in. And the reason, Richard, that I walked in, I was down in Sinaloa at a meeting in Culiacan, letting them know that I was basically done. I'd already made all I needed. Snohomish County records up here can confirm all the real estate holdings I had. I mean, I was set for life. And I didn't mind working a job. I loved my antique stores. I loved my gas station and feed store and all my rentals. I enjoyed having purpose every day of my life that was not related to criminality. But the problem that I was dealing with at that time, Richard, were people that I came up with 40 years ago when they were all poor. They were all struggling peasants. We were all getting into the drug business basically at the same time together. This is before Rafael Caracantero built the big fields out in Chihuahua and all of that. We were all still struggling. But what happened is they become wealthy almost overnight, and then they become powerful almost overnight. And they simply didn't want to cut loose the control that they had created and manifested. But they needed that Pacific Northwest corridor. And by that time, I was moving a quarter to a third of a ton of cocaine at a time that they were sending to me, Richard. And I never had to put money up front. I never had to go anywhere for it. It was delivered right to my safe house that I had established. I just made payments according to how the cash came in. It was very unique for a gabacho, for a gringo, to be able to operate in that capacity. And we're talking anywhere from $12 to $15 million a month sending south. So it was a pretty significant account for him. And I remember very well the meeting in 93 where I went down there and said, look, I'm good to go. I'll help you put some of your people in place up here, and you guys can go ahead and take over what I created. And, oh, yeah, sure, no problem. You know, we grew up with you. We love you. I got home and I had a third of a ton of cocaine and 2 soldados sitting in my driveway when I got in from the airport. Because I had underboss capability at that time of my life, I was able to tell them that, listen, we're heated up here. Get that load the hell out of here and send it south. They shipped it out that night, got it out of there. The next day I walked into the U.S. Attorney's office and said, I'm Hal Bradley. And they said, oh, my God, it's Hal Bradley. You're the number one target in the Pacific North. It blew them away. When do you have a kingpin walk in of his own free will, not under arrest? You know, they knew that I had a high-ranking law enforcement officer in Seattle PD Narcotics Division on my payroll. They knew a lot of things. So I had intel coming in at a pretty consistent basis. I knew that I wasn't under threat of arrest right away. I had barriers set up between me and the markets out there to where I only had 3 witnesses that could have testified against me, and they had been witness to extreme cartel violence. So I knew that wasn't going to happen. But really, Richard, I was done. You know, I had made what I wanted. It required me having to work hard the rest of my life, but I loved hard work, and I just wanted to live a better life. But the moment they came at me that way, I knew that I'm going to take on a drug cartel out of Mexico, and I better get a bigger baseball bat, because when you go to war with something as powerful as that, you need to know how to try to survive that war. And so that's why I walked in. And it blew their minds, absolutely blew them away. They'd never had anybody like that come in. And I remember the meeting that day with the U.S. Attorney. He organized an alphabet soup of agencies to meet me in the conference room that day at their building. And I mean, we had everything from ATF, DEA, Customs, the Central Intelligence Agency. We had so many different agencies all in representation. And I walked in with a tailor cut 3-piece suit, dripping in diamonds and gold, because I wanted to make sure that I imprinted on those that didn't know me that I wasn't some guy flipping 20 or 30 kilos of cocaine a month. I was a serious player, and I needed to portray and exude that. And I did. And so that day, instead of signing a green card, they had me sign a blue card. Green card is you're going to prison, period. You're gone. Blue card is you're working for the Department of Justice as a cooperating source. The next 19 months of my life, Richard, I was most of it spent south of the American border. I was operational in various countries in Central America, one end of Mexico to the other. I was being inserted and infiltrated into other criminal organizations down there. And I mean, by the time the dust had settled, I'd worked down from a life sentence as a kingpin under the Kingpin Act, all the way to where I only got 8 years in prison. And the cost of cocaine in the Pacific Northwest, as I was told by DEA, had gone up $2,000 a kilo. That's how bad I get them up there. And I was honored. I felt really good about it. I was clear in my decision. As I told you, when I went to Folsom Prison, I never told on anybody. I never even thought of such a thing. You just take your hit, you go do your time, and you get out and start life. They came at me. They came after me. I had just gotten married and had my first child. I didn't want to raise my family up in that environment. It was time to make a life-changing source, and they snapped up my family, got them out of the way while I went to work to an undisclosed site, and we just rolled up our sleeves and we went after them, boy. And I got to tell you, Rich, I was in doing an undercover operation down in Acapulco, a joint CIA DEA mission, and that night, Raul Arellano Felix, I know you know that name, the Arellano Felix family. Yeah, he just came in from Bogota, and he's sitting there telling us that they had just shot and killed Pablo Escobar, the boss. And we didn't have TV on or nothing. We didn't know it. So the first time we ever heard about Don Pablo being hit was from somebody that was down there when he got hit. And he came up that night heading back to Tijuana, but dropped in to see us and upgraded us on the information. So the following morning, I was able to break away from them, feigning doing some shopping or something. I don't remember right now, but I met up at the hotel where the CIA DEA guys were at, and I debriefed down. And they were down there doing intelligence gathering of planes that were flying out of Central America, doing parachute drops of narcotics right there in the state of Guerrero. And so they were up there in the mountains all night filming all of that stuff. But they were just fascinated by the way that the information came to me. I had a card from Raul Arellano Felix that he gave me, so I had his number. But, you know, I knew Ramon Arellano Felix when he was 7 years old. When I lived in the village, his, I believe, uncle would come and visit Senor Mimo, the man responsible for my safety. And he had this little 7-year-old kid named Ramon with him. And Ramon and I used to ride burros together. And in the time I was down there, they came and visited too, I believe 3 times. And Ramon and I kind of got to know each other as kids. So many years later, here I am working for the Sinaloa drug cartel, and I'm up in Tijuana. Then I decided to look Ramon Arellano Felix up, and Ramon and I see each other, and it's instantly emotional. I mean, we were kids together type thing, right? And these guys are they're moving 15 to 20 metric tons of cocaine a month through the corridor. I mean, they are major players. And Ramon and I went out, snorted coke, got laid for 3 days. I mean, we just had a hell of a good time. And then I told him where I was working. He says, "Don't say that around here. They'll kill you. You're going to get killed." Because at that time, El Chapo Guzman, was building the empire in Sinaloa. He is no longer in Jalisco. And he was an enemy to that family. And Chapo was responsible for the killings of several people that were very closely connected to the Arellano Felix syndicate. So I said, yeah, okay, no problem. We kept our mouths shut, gave each other a hug, and I never saw him again. And the next time I heard about him, he had been shot and killed in Mazatlan. And it was really heartbreaking, but such is the life that we chose. We just went with it. But
our lives have certain similarities that, I mean, you know, you and I can sit there and shoot the shit for hours, and other people will say, what are they talking about? Because the people that we've been exposed to and the elements that we've been exposed to and the monsters that we took on, I took on the state of California. That people don't understand the threat, the total disregard for our own safety that we took upon ourselves to try to stop something or to try to bring about change. And that's why I thought it was important for my people to kind of understand who's this guy Richard Caruso was talking to, because I knew about your backstory, and I just thought it was important to kind of lay it out that you're just not somebody that's sitting behind the microphone. You're someone who's basically speaks the same language as I do.
Exactly. And to tell you something for your audience to understand, a security housing unit corrections officer is literally at risk every second of the time that he's on that he's in that shoe floor. I mean, it is a highly dangerous and highly volatile environment. And all you got to do, Richard, is make one mistake and you're freaking dead. And you know how the convicts, these aren't inmates, these are convicts. And
There's different.
Oh, there's a big difference. And that psychological mentality that they carry, the extreme hatred. But there's one thing, Richard, that even when I was in SHU, that we all had a commonality to, is an officer who didn't demean you or look down on you or treat you like you saw so many of them get treated bad like I did. I had great respect for a couple of the officers on the floor. I didn't want to know them. I didn't become associated in conversation. I just back up to the window, get cuffed, taken out to the yard, brought back in, back up to the window and the door, get uncuffed, and that was it. But I always appreciated the respect of guys like you that knew we're all on the edge. We're so wired with that.
Well, I would always let the lifers, in the certain gangs, or people don't understand that you got prison gangs, you got street gangs. Crips and Bloods are not calling any kind of shots inside that prison. The Black Guerrilla families calling.
Yeah, the BGF. Yeah,
the Aryan Brotherhood's calling the shots. The MA is calling it. And what's the Familia? They're calling it. So they don't understand that language, and so I would let the lifers or the shot callers, like in general population, I would let them run the unit. Keep peace. I know you got stuff in your house you're not supposed to be having. I know there's a radio up there that's not yours. I know you probably got tobacco up there. I know you're probably extorting. But you know what? No one's getting stuck. No one's getting hurt. No one's getting killed. Keep the unit clean. When my sergeant walks through the door, grab a broom, and we'll all get together. We'll all get along fine. So, exactly. And as a big guy, being 6'4", 280 pounds, they automatically, when they saw me, thought, well, this guy's just going to be an asshole. And when they saw that basically, no, I was just firm but fair, and I didn't push myself around, we all got along great. I mean, I would have shot callers. I had a shot caller from the Bay Area, 415 set, come up to me and ask me one time, if like in the general population, you got A section, B section, and C section.
Yeah.
You got a gunner in the bubble, and he's looking at all three sections. And he came up to me and he said, "Hey, Caruso, can you please divert the gunner's attention to the C section?" And I'm like, his name was Cliff. And I said, "Cliff," I said, "why? What's going to happen?" He goes, "Well, we had one of our youngsters. It was a black set out of 415 Bloods that disrespected the white boys last night on the floor, and we want to show them that we're going to police our own." I said, "You can't stick them. You can't do anything like that." And they go, "We're not going to stick them." So the whites were over there in the corner watching this all go down. And I called the gunner over to C section. I said, "Hey, Smith." And Smith come over and start talking to me. And you know that sound, Doc. Yeah. You know that shuffling sound on the ground of the shoes.
Damn
and you
right.
hear that shuffling sound. And everybody's looking over in the A section. And then, what happened is a couple of the Bloods over there basically tuned up that youngster. And I walked over there and, I was very loud. And I said, "Are you okay? What happened?" I knew he wasn't going to snitch. He said he slipped. I said, "You sure nobody hit you?" He said, "Nobody hit me. Can I go see the MTA?" Well, what they were doing, there was two things going on there. I was showing those convicts, especially that youngster, you're not running anything in this housing unit.
Yeah.
And they were showing each other, as far as gangs, that we will police ourselves. We will not tolerate disrespect inside this unit. And like you said earlier, there's a difference between a convict and an inmate. I mean, an inmate, you're going to snivel and cry about all the most trivial shit, where a convict's going to suck it up. So if a convict starts, complaining or brings something to an officer's attention, a veteran officer is going to heed that and say, "You know what, there's something going on here." I'll give you an example. I was in the SHU, and I had this Muslim convict named Jones. And I mean, I'm 6'4" and I'm a big guy, but this guy just dwarfed me. But he never caused any problems. He was quiet. He was a Muslim. And if you've done time with Muslims,
Yeah.
they're quiet individuals until you get them all riled up. So he all of a sudden's up on the second tier on this day. This guy's never caused any problems. And he's flooding the tier and he's screaming and yelling. And I'm like, what the hell? This is so out of character. So I put my vest on. I get my partner. We go up there, and me and him had a rapport. He was very respectful to me. And all of a sudden, this day, he's like, fuck you, get out of here. And I'm like, hey, listen, Jones. I go, if you don't stop, we're coming in there. We're coming in to distract you. He's like, bring your ass in here, Caruso. Bring your ass in here. So everybody, all the homeboys and all the rivals, are on the side. They can't see into his cell, but they can hear. They got their ear up on the cell door. And
yeah, so I remember that.
I called the sergeant. I said, hey, we got to go in and get Jones. He's not coming out. He's flooding the tier. We shut his water off. And so the sergeant comes in, and we go up there. We get our gear on. And at the time, our gear consisted of a helmet. I put a towel around my neck for I wouldn't get stuck in the neck.
Yeah.
I put socks over my boots so I didn't slip on the piss of shit when I went inside the cell, because they would put it on the cell floor, so we'd have to slide around fighting them. And I had the shield. There was 4 of us. I had the shield. The next guy had handcuffs. The third guy had a baton, and the fourth guy had leg irons. Yeah. And I would be the first one through that door as the big guy. So
and the shield.
I've done numerous cell extractions, and to me it's just gotten old. I've gotten injured. At first I'm excited about it. Now I got to go. And Jones is dwarfing me. And he's on the other side. This convict's on the other side of the door, screaming at me, and my butthole's going like this, like, oh boy, that cell door is going to crack, and we're going to collide, right?
It's real.
When they break that cell door, and I go to hit Jones, Jones turns around and puts his hands behind his back and leans over on the bed, and I'm like, what is this? Right? Nobody can see him. Yeah. So I'm like, oh boy, and I cuff him, but I start crashing his cell and throwing his mattress down like we're fighting, and everybody's yelling, thinking we're fighting in the cell. And I cuff him up, and I get him out of the cell, and I yank him, carrying him down the stairs, and he's struggling, and I'm fighting him into the office, and I throw him in the chair in the office, and I'm like, what the fuck? And he goes, Caruso. He goes, that Mexican mafia member up there in cell 10 has a shank in his cell, and he's going to bring it out on the yard tomorrow.
Yeah, beautiful.
He did this ruckus to get this information to me.
To save your life.
Yeah, well, save his life. This is a shoot.
Oh, they were going to hit him, huh?
Well, they were going to hit somebody, because this is what happened. That's the whole key to my story, Hal, is you were in the shoe in Folsom, so how it went down. Back in the day when you were there and you were in the adjustment center of shoe, you were segregated.
Yes.
So the white boys are looking at the blacks are looking at the Hispanics. You're talking shit through the fence, but when you go out to the adjustment yard, you can't get to each other. So then they have this prison boom in California, and they have these rocket scientists saying, you know what? Let's take all these guys out of Tehachapi, Folsom, San Quentin, all the adjustment centers, and let's build all these little handball courts down at Corcoran, and let's run integrated yards. Jeez. So now look at the house you got. Yeah, look at your face.
Well, I can imagine. I've been there, done that.
So now we're housing them black, white, Mexican. So every day the fights were predictable. That if me and you as Woods are in that cell, and one of the blacks attacks me, tomorrow you better handle your business, or you're going to handle it with me.
Yeah.
So exactly. The fight in the shoe became so predictable, and I'm jumping ahead of myself because I wanted to touch on something that you touched on. Is like you. I mean, I grew up in upstate New York, small town. I come from a big Italian family. I went in the Marine Corps, and I was a military policeman in the Marine Corps. And I got out of the Marine Corps in 1986, and I wanted to be a state trooper back in New York. But I heard about how much prison guards were making in California, and I went out and started working in the California prison system.
Interesting.
My first prison I worked was outside Sacramento, and at the time in the 80s, they were just like, build more prisons, big money, prison boom. And then New York shortly followed. So people don't realize how much money the prison industry is. So here they are, building all these prisons in California, and they build this prison outside of Sacramento called Mule Creek State Prison.
Yeah, Mule Creek. I'm familiar
Yeah,
with
so that's the first prison I went to, and we had about 5,000 inmates. And I got there, and I'm just coming out of the Marine Corps. I'm young, dumb, full of cum, just wanting to kick ass and take names. As far as the line between me and you, Hal, was very, very big. It was us against you, us against them. There was
Absolutely.
it was just, but there was respect. But we come from different sides of the tracks. So I get there at Mule Creek, and I see them giving away the house. I'm like, this prison is weak, right? I'm like, it was a level 3. We had some level 4 inmates, but I'm like, this prison is weak. It's not stimulating me enough. And I had the killer in there in my general population unit named Jeffrey Powell. Jeffrey Powell was the inmate they made the movie after. It was about him and that black guy that kidnapped the LAPD officers, the Onion Field, in which James Wood played him. They killed the LAPD officer. So Jeffrey Paul is in my unit, and he comes up to me with this cat, and he says, "Caruso, can I have this cat taken to the main gate? My wife is going to pick it up." Well, dude, you're a cop killer. I'm not going to do anything for you, right?
That's right.
So he goes to my sergeant, and my sergeant has the cat taken for Jeffrey Powell, just based on his fame of his crime, to his wife to the main gate. I'm like, this is not for me. I'm not going to cater to certain inmates that are higher profile than other inmates. I need a stronger, tougher prison. So I was looking at Folsom, I was looking at San Quentin, but the word was they were building this prison named Corcoran, and Pelican Bay had not even been built.
No, I know. I remember when Pelican Bay opened.
So they were going to send all these guys like you that are in the shoe in Folsom, Tehachapi, and San Quentin to Corcoran, and now we're going to integrate you. So I'm like, hey, I need to be a part of this. I want to be, this is right up my alley. I want to get in there, get my hands dirty. And so I get down to Corcoran, and we had about over 6,000 inmates. We had level 1, 2, 3, 4, and we had a whole side of the prison that's a shoe. Yeah. So it was the only one in California at the time. So in the shoe, the yard would go out in the morning at 8 o'clock, and at 1 o'clock, and then at 5 o'clock. 8 o'clock in the morning, as that yard goes out every morning, you're hearing boom, 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 gunshots going out throughout the prison because fights are happening. And everybody's like, holy shit, why is all this violence happening? And so, well, the reason it's happening is because, we're integrating the yards.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's just crazy to me.
Sacramento is saying, you know what? Keep sending them out there. They know they can't fight. Well, they don't realize that convict or that gang member's loyalty to their gang is more than their loyalty to the rules and regulations within the Department of Corrections. So they're out there every morning fighting. I mean, hell, I got them coming up, looking up at me in the Sally Port, cuffed right before going out that door, saying, "Caruso, please don't kill me today. Please shoot me with the blocks. Shoot me with the blocks." And I would tell them, I would say, hey, listen, you know what? Don't go out there with a weapon. Don't go out there. Don't pick them up and head slam them. He goes, no, it's just going to be a fist fight. And most of the fist fights, they're looking up at us at the camera. They're looking up at us in a gunfight because they want to stop, but they got to save face their people.
That's right.
So as a gunner, I know this, right? So I have the ability to let the fight go on where more bodily injury is going to occur, and then I can justify to pick up a 9mm or the Mini 14 and use that, or I can pepper them with the wooden blocks in which they want to kind of get that badge of courage to go back to the cell and say, I handle business. So these fights became so predictable, Hal, that, I was going to kill. So I tested for sergeant. I was in the top tier. I was going to be picked up as a sergeant, and I was going to kill somebody, and not 99%, 100% get away with it. I was going to kill somebody that didn't have it coming. And that was the fork in the road that I hit to say, I can't do this. I can't kill. I don't care if it's us and them. I can't kill that convict that's done nothing to me, that has never bothered me in any way, just to get blood on my hands to fit in with this rude officers over here that are doing this violence. Hell, we had more violence at Corcoran State Prison than all the nation's prisons put together.
I
And it
saw
was,
it. I saw the documentary on that actually many years ago. It was pretty
yeah.
amazing. But
So,
I'd like to jump in here to let your audience understand that, when you have shot callers in a yard and you have people that have the keys to the yard, which are the shot callers, there's no way in hell that you can back down from an order given. The same thing for you, Richard. You're in there with corrupted cops. And this is something the audience needs to understand. A lot of the choices you made were out of your control to make them. You had to survive a dual threat. You had to survive being able to survive with the cops that were in there, as well as those of us that would do nothing better than to hit you at the first chance we get. Because the shoe in Folsom Prison when I was there in the 80s, any opportunity, and I saw COs in there getting seriously wounded. And any opportunity they can make. And these orders came down from the Aryan Nation. They came down from the BGF. They came down from Miami. And if you don't do it, you're dead, period. But in your situation, Richard, you're trying to be a stand-up cop. You understand, like you said, how they look to the camera. That was their signal to you to, hit them with the wood block. But, you've got other cops watching your action at the same time that are corrupted. And therein lies the dual threat. And I have nothing but respect for you. I know what you went through. I know what that took to do what you did on a moral fiber. And you have my respect, sir.
I appreciate that, bro. For me, people hear my story, and especially guys like you, they're like, you know what? I know what that guy was up against.
Oh, yeah.
But for me, it was more of a higher power of, can I live with myself after this? Can I live with myself killing another human being that didn't have it coming? Now, if you were out there hurting somebody, or if you were out there and I had to protect somebody else, I'd have no problem popping you. But to do it, to send you out there, to send you out into a car wreck that I know is going to happen and you get killed. I don't know if you saw the 60-minute piece I sent you where the guy was paralyzed. His name was Talomas, and they shot him in his neck. But in that piece, what it doesn't say is they just sent him out there 2 weeks before that, and he fought the same guy. So they were sending him out there multiple times to fight the multiple people. This is before UFC. This is before Gladiator. This is Gladiator days.
Yeah, this is real. It's just real.
Yeah, so I said, you know what? I've had enough of this. I'm a Marine. I want to do the right thing. I'm not trying to say that I was a choir boy, hell, because if an inmate had something coming, you throw piss or shit or something, but a convict knows that. A convict knows there's repercussions for his behavior.
Absolutely.
And he'll take that ass whipping. Okay?
Absolutely.
But that's the difference. So I'm not saying that I wasn't involved in protecting my people, but when it came to killing people and maiming people and taking lives, I had to draw a line in the sand. But hell, what I didn't know when I went down the road to blow the whistle on the state of California is I thought the state government would work with federal government and we would all have a kumbaya and law enforcement. And we would come together and we would rectify the situation. And I didn't realize the egos, the hatred, the bravado between agencies. And so what happened was I went to my lieutenant and he was a Marine. And I said, hey, listen, this shooting happened. And they invited a female over to the unit and put her up there. And they put her up there in the tower as an officer and kind of as entertainment. And they put the fighters out there, and they shot him, and they shot the guy, and I went to the library and researched the press release that the prison and the Department of Corrections gave, and the inmate, he was a Crip, and the inmate's name was Tate. Well, in the press release, it said Tate failed to listen to all orders to stop his aggression. He was the aggressor. Well, I knew he was the victim. Yeah, I knew that it was all set up. So I started going into files. So imagine this. I'm on duty. I'm checking out keys out of control in the middle of the night. I'm going into C files with flashlights, and I'm stealing them out of your C file. I'm stealing pictures. I'm stealing stuff in uniform.
Wow.
I'm putting it in my lunchbox. I got to go through security to come out. I have all this evidence in my uniform for 4 months. I'm stealing all this stuff throughout the prison. If they would have found out, I would have been dead. So I'm
Oh yeah.
stealing. I'm stealing all this stuff, taking it back to my home in Hanford, California. In Hanford, we have 5 prisons. We got Avenal, Wasco, Delano, Corcoran. We have all. It's Copland, and the whole Central Valley is Copland. So I'm taking all this evidence back to my house, right? And I'm sitting there saying, you know what? I'm telling my wife, we'll all work together. We're going to stop the killings at Corcoran. Once I expose it, it's going to stop. She was young. I had a little girl. She had no idea. She's from the Bay Area. She was like, why can't you just get another job? I said, because I'm a cop. Why should I have to get another job because I'm a cop? So now this is what turns.
And a former Marine, brother.
Exactly.
Simplify.
But before that, what I didn't tell you before I went down the road to expose him, my brother Tony Caruso, back in my small town, he was a big construction worker. I'll send you a picture of him now. This guy's a monster. And he's loved by my community.
Wow.
He ends up going down a dark hole after a relationship. And his best friend that he grew up with told him, listen, you got $10,000. If you got $10,000, I got a connection in the city you can make $40,000 out of that 10, and I can do it in 90 days. Tony knew what he was getting involved in. This guy was bringing cocaine out of the city to upstate, putting it at Tony's house, and they were cutting it up, and it was going to get distributed, right? So Tony's hands were dirty in that. But Tony never got in trouble before as far as at the judges. He was the type of guy in the snow. He's plowing old people's driveways out. Judge everybody's and not asking for no money. Everybody loved him, right?
He made a mistake.
So he gets involved with that, right? So they did one shipment to his house. They got the cocaine at Tony's house. This guy, I won't say his name. This guy this is his best friend, Hal, from childhood. Goes back to the city. He's coming out of the city. He gets popped by the state troopers, and he had a little amount of steroids in his car, and he would have probably got it pled down to a misdemeanor. But he said, "Hey, I know a drug kingpin that lives in Hornell, New York, in a small town up there named Tony Caruso." My brother was no drug kingpin. He didn't know anybody. He was a construction worker.
Yeah.
So he gave him the guy below him instead of giving them the drug keeper, because they would have killed him. So the cops and my brother's best friend arranged Tony to meet him at a Burger King outside our county. So my brother pulls up in a dump truck, Carhartt coat, combat boots, goes in, is eating a salad, and his best friend comes in and says, "Hey, this is the guy from the city sitting here." And Tony wants to speak to his best friend in the car. And instead of his best friend saying, I'm wired. Tony goes, "Okay, here, I'll give you some more money. Let's get it." They take him down. They had 5 cars. They took him down there at that Burger King. This is outside the jurisdiction of where he lived because everybody loved him, the judges. Yeah. They take him down, right? And they say, "We want to know who you're working for." Who I'm working for? Pat is the one. He's the one that is getting the drugs, right? So they gave my brother, who had never been in prison before because of mandatory sentencing laws. What happened is the warrant said it was on his house, where they found cocaine in the house and the scales and stuff, but in the shed was where that cocaine was. They brought out of the city, and they broke that lock off without a warrant. So that got thrown. They gave my brother 8 1/3 to life.
Oh my God.
And he started off in Attica. So here I am, coming out of the Corps, big, proud Italian family. My other brother was running for mayor of our town. He was a police officer. This brother, Tony, everyone loved my brother, Tony, but now he's in this dark hole. And now when I talk about you and me and us and them, there is no us and them.
No.
Those guys going out to those shoe yards, Hal, are my brother, Tony. I'm looking at it with more of a humanistic eyeball saying, that could be my brother. That could be my brother. So that shrunk that us and them mentality to where I'm like, wow. So that's why that moral compass went off in my head saying, you know what, this could be my brother out here. So Now I go up my chain of command. I got all this
That's
evidence.
that's
I got
pretty
all this.
rare, Richard. That's pretty rare. I've been around a lot of COs on a lot of different joints, and for you to be able to come and explain how you felt about the men that you were dealing with, because you weren't dealing with regular inmate population, you were dealing with the convict population, and to put yourself at that level with them, I have nothing but respect for that, because I get it, I understand it. Everybody's got somebody in their family that's going through something, but you took it to that other step, and you showed the respect of mutuality. You understood what these guys, some of them were platformed and feeling within themselves. And it's, the SHU program, folks, that Richard and I so both understand, it's not at all like the rest of that prison. It's really, really dangerous. It's very hardcore. And you're dealing with such an emotional factor and a psychologically stem factor of putting an animal in a cage that literally can barely do anything other than breathe. And emotions build up in that environment. My doctorate is in pastoral counseling, and I spent 13 years to get that doctorate, Richard. And most of my studies were done in federal prison before I was transferred from Springfield to Leavenworth. I was a hospice counselor when I was in prison for fellow dying prisoners. Took 24 men through the dying process. But at nighttime, when I'm sitting in those dying rooms with these guys that are passing away, that's where I did my seminary years, my seminary studies. And when I was wrapped up with all that, I got ordained in the prison. Johnny Gambino threw my yard feast when I got ordained because they all believed in it. But the point I'm making is this. There's a certain level of understanding, if you will. These are high charging people. But that environment of SHU, that 8 months was like doing 10 years outside of that SHU program. I mean, it started breaking me. And I can't imagine being a lifer in there for 10, 11, 15 years. And brother, I knew guys that were in there a long time like that. I mean, it was horrifying.
I don't know if you knew who Rochelle McGee, the San Quentin.
Did you know Jack Mahone, General Jack, head of the Aryan Brotherhood, Folsom Prison, 1980s? Ultimately, he ended up in Pelican Bay, but I was in the yard with Jack and knew Jack very well. And
I knew Cornfed. I knew
Cornfed.
Yeah, I knew all those guys.
I did. Yeah.
But what happened? So Hal, what happened is I have all this evidence at my house now of shootings. I have pictures of abused inmates, of shot inmates, of the violence that's going on. And now I got to say, you know what? I'm going to go up my chain of command. I'm going to try to stop this. So I go up my chain of command and say, listen, that shooting that just happened with Tate, that press release, you guys lying. You're lying about what's going on in here. And they told me to keep my mouth shut.
Yeah.
So then I got a hold of the FBI. And I got a hold of the FBI thinking that, the federal government will come in, they'll do the right thing. So I get a hold of the FBI and they want to come to my house. And so I set up a time where they could show up the next week. I think it was a Tuesday. They were to come by like 9 a.m.
Yeah.
And they were to come by. They were going to see what I had because they knew about the violence. They're reading about it every day in the prison, in the Fresno B. They knew that, we had the most violent prison. And so I send my wife and my daughter away and I hear a knock on the door, Hal, and they identify themselves as the FBI, and it's a male and a female. But before that, the night before that, my conscience started getting the best of me.
Yeah.
I realized for years, this warden at Corcoran, through all the cell extractions, through all the use of force situations I was in, he had always been there for me. I've never been in trouble before. He's getting ready to promote me to sergeant, and he's like my dad. But you know what? An officer just can't go up to the warden's door and knock on it. There's a chain of command. But I said, fuck it. I left my post. I went up to the warden's office, and I knocked on the door, and he saw my face, and he said, come on in, Caruso, and I come in. And I started having tears in my eyes. And I said, sir, what I'm about to tell you is probably the end of my career in law enforcement. He's like, what's wrong? I go, well, as you know, we've had a lot of deaths here at Corcoran, a lot of shootings. I said, I've done in my investigation and through firsthand information, I know some of those shootings were unjustified and those officers were cleared. And I said, I have taken material and evidence out of the prison and I have it at my house. And I have a meeting with the FBI in the morning. And his face just turned white. He was stone faced. He's like, he didn't believe me, Hal. He didn't believe an officer.
What a ballsy move. Jesus.
Yeah, he didn't believe an officer could do this, right?
Yeah.
So I said, what do I do, boss? And he said, what could he say? He said, meet with the FBI. He didn't think it was the FBI, right? He said, meet with them. I said, okay. So that morning, they knock on my door. It's the FBI. I invite them in. I take them back in the bedroom. Everything's laid out on the bed. The male, Agent Oswald, is looking through all the evidence, looking at pictures. He just kept saying, wow, wow. And then the female's pacing back and forth. And I see she's all nervous. And I'm like, what's wrong? She goes, what's wrong? And she got in my face. She goes, you went to your warden and told them what you did. And I'm like, hey, we're all law enforcement officers. Why can't we work together? Right? She goes, no, it doesn't work like that, Richard. He called the governor's office, which, was Wilson at the time.
Wow.
Build more prisons, build more prisons. He goes, they have state investigators on their way to your house right now with warrants for the stolen state evidence that you took out of that prison, and they're going to kick your door in and they're going to take this unless you turn it over to us right now. And I had to come to Jesus. I'm like, here. We start putting it in garbage bags, putting all this evidence in garbage bags. I flip on my sneakers and we start walking out the front door. Hell, and these two cars screech up, just like she said.
I bet.
I'm standing behind the FBI, like they're in front of me, like a wall of justice. And these two the two investigators get out of their car. They flash their state badge to the feds, identify themselves, and ask what the FBI is doing with me because Caruso works for us. They go, well, we're going to interview him. They go, what are you going to talk to him about? They go, you don't need to know.
Yeah.
They go, what's in that bag?
The FBI.
Yeah, they go, the state was like, what's in that bag? They go, you don't need to know. You need to back down. This is a federal investigation.
Wow.
The state investigator walked right through, parted the FBI, got that far from my face, and whispered, did you give him the evidence you took out of Corcoran? And I said, yes. And he just looked at me with such disappointment, and he goes, I can't believe it. The FBI put me in their car. These two got in their car. The U.S. Attorney's office is about 35 miles to Fresno. Now we're going like 75, 80 miles an hour. These guys are chasing us. They're chasing the FBI. So the FBI calling in their plates saying, what the fuck? We told these state investigators to back off. There's two scenarios going down here, they said. These are not state investigators, number one. Or number two, what's in this bag is going to bring down the house of cards.
Oh, yeah.
So now they get me into the U.S. Attorney's office and the FBI office in Fresno, and I'm in there with a wall separating them. These two state agents show up, and they're demanding, we want to talk to Caruso. He works for us. He's our guy. And I'm just sitting there quiet, and then the head of the FBI comes out named Agent Beasley, and he says, if you don't leave the premises right now, we're going to arrest you for obstructing this investigation, this federal investigation. So the state investigator said, will you just ask Caruso if he'll talk to us? So the head of the FBI pokes his head around the wall, and he does this. He says, Richard, do you want to talk to the state investigators right now? I said real loud, I said, not right now, I don't. He comes back and he tells the state investigators he doesn't want to talk to you. Get off the premises. They leave. They interview me for hours on end. They take me in front of grand jury. They got my testimony in front of the grand jury soon after. Now they're going to take me back to my home at Copland. Like I said, the whole community's correctional officers.
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah.
So they're taking me back. It's 10 o'clock at night. My wife hasn't heard from me all day. The feds are like, holy shit, when they saw this evidence that I had. And they take me back to the house. The gate on the side is swinging by the wind. They keep me in the car and they get their guns out. They're going around the house to clear the house to make sure nobody's there. And my wife was like looking out the window, like she didn't know who we were. She was scared. So we go in the house and my wife jumps in my arms, like, where have you been? What's going on? What happened? And the FBI said, Mr. Caruso, he's okay. We're going to have his back. We'll get up with you in the morning, right? And I said, I'll hear from you guys in the morning. And they said, yes. So I shut the door. 15 minutes later, it's about 10:30 at night. I hear at the front door. I'm like, oh, who's this? I grab my pistol. I walk to the front door. I look out. It's the two state investigators. They were following us the whole time. And we didn't have cell phones back then. Yeah. So they go, Rich, I go, what do you guys want? They go, you work for us. You work for us. You got to come back to us. We're your family. They're not your family. I said, well, why can't we just all work together and do the right thing? Stop this violence. They go, Richard, it doesn't work like that. They go, we want to know what you gave them. Will you interview with us? I said, I'll interview with you. I'll interview with them. I'll interview with any law enforcement entity to stop this violence. They go, can we take you down to the police department, interview you? I'm like, yes, let's go. So they take me down to the police department. So I'm in there interviewing now with them for 2.5 hours. And the one agent's like this going, oh my God, can't believe what I gave them, right? So after the interview, they said, we appreciate you interviewing with us. And I said, well, I gotta go back to work. I have to go back and walk the main line now at Corcoran, right? And so they said, well, we're going to talk to the warden. Don't go in for 2 days. We're talking to the warden. So they take me out to a cotton field, Hal. This is around Fresno. There's cotton fields.
Well, I know Fresno. That's frightening.
So this is out in Hampton, out by Lemoore. I thought I'm going to get capped.
Yeah.
They're going to cap me in this, but there's a phone booth. And they call the governor. And they say, sir, we got Caruso. And it's not going to be good. He gave them videotapes, audio tapes. He gave them pictures. He gave them C-file incident reports. He gave them everything. And they were like, oh, boy. So they're going to damage control immediately. But the bigger picture here, Hal, is the California Correctional Peace Officers Union. The union, our union, was the highest contributor to all the governor candidates, Republicans that were coming in. So we were the most powerful entity. So here the union is caught with it's one of their own, turning on one of their own, turning on the establishment, right? So they're caught in the middle, right? So the governor tells them, take Caruso back to his house. We'll be up with him. We'll get up with him. They take me back to my house. I get a call from the warden the next day, say, listen, come into work tomorrow. Don't worry about it. Just come into work. I said, well, obviously I'm under a threat. I said, he goes, well, Richard, we'll watch out. We'll make sure, we'll try to ensure nothing happens. And so I go back to work and the word's out. Somebody went to the FBI. The word is out. It's out amongst the inmates. It's out amongst the officers. We had 6,000 inmates. We had 800 officers divided into 3 shifts. So it's out and it's out there. And so I'm walking the main line and I'm getting that look, from convicts. Like, I don't know how they're looking at me. And so word came down, they're taking me out of the SHU. Now follow me. You understand this. They're taking me out of the SHU, which is a controlled setting that I control. Now they're going to put me in the main kitchen with SHU inmates that just got out of the SHU behind the kitchen door with just me and 20 SHU inmates working in the kitchen with just me as an officer with no backup unless they come through that door and I unlock it. They want me to get hit. They put a hit on me to be killed. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So Benjamin Peters I think he was either second or third in command of the M8 at the time. And this is right before my job change. I was on the yard as the gunner. He was on walk alone. He's on a walk alone yard because of his position. I mean, when he came in our unit, Hal, when Topo came off that bus in that unit, what do you think you saw when that Sally Port door opened inside that SHU? You saw fish lines. So about everything going like he was the king, right? And so Topo is out there on the yard walking in circles, and he comes up to me as the gunner. He goes, I know what you did. He goes, we know what you did. Yeah. And he goes, I'm telling you this, nobody inside any prison will touch you because we won't allow it. And I was realizing what was occurring. I was realizing that the people for all these years, the bad guys, the bad people, us, them, these monsters of people, they're the ones that are going to protect me. Yeah. They put a protective circle around me. The Aryan Brotherhood, the Black Guerrilla family, the Mexican Mafia. They couldn't believe that this cop took on this monster and is going to take on this monster to stop the violence of their people. I was in Oakland, California, in Gold's Gym. I'm working out, and I hear this, hey, Caruso, I saw you on A&E. Good job. It was Sonny from Hell's Angels. I mean, these shot callers and stuff couldn't believe that this cop stood up, did the right thing at the risk of losing everything. He didn't care.
Including your life, Richard, by other cops. You could have lost your life. You could have got taken out and taken out hard. But,
100%.
As a convict with an old D number from California State Prison System, we all would have stood in your corner in a heartbeat, because you know what? It's very disheartening to know you're about ready to get released from your cell, go out into a very violent situation, and you got no one there looking out for you.
You got no choice to fight.
Remember what you said earlier, brother, how the guy would look up at the camera. I'll never forget you saying that as long as I live, because I know.
You know it. You know it.
I do know it. I do. I'm proud of you for that, man. And I'm proud of you for taking the shot the way you did. Because you know what? Semper Fi, Marine, you just did the right thing. Period. Human life is very valuable, no matter who or what you think of this other person. I spent 15 years in the cartels. I've seen a lot of killing. I've seen a lot of torture. I've seen a lot of I've been kidnapped once. I've been captured once. I've been through the hell and back again, working for my country. And you know, it's what was instituted into you early on that brought the humanitarian effort out at risk to your own life. And ladies and gentlemen, listening to the story right now, I'm telling you, as an ex-convict that's been in hard joints before, that officer there risked his life at great risk. It's amazing to me you're alive. I'll be honest with you, Richard, because I was
ready. Hell, I was ready every day for that to happen, because I already got peace with my Lord Jesus Christ. And I'm not a Bible thumper. But I'd already got peace that, you know what, if I did make it up there to heaven or wherever, that I know I had some negative marks on the side of the chalkboard, but this positive mark was a heavy positive mark, because I saved a bunch of lives.
Yeah,
so what happened, Hal, is that they put a hit on me to be killed, and Topo comes up to me and says, "This is not going to happen, Caruso."
Right.
And I didn't really believe him. I didn't know how much power he had, but
I know who he is. I know exactly who you're talking about. He's a hardcore shot caller. He's like number 1 or number 2 in the list. He's up there. Yeah.
So then I get contacted by the Los Angeles Times, and a guy by the name of Mark Arax, a reporter, and he's like, "Richard, this is Mark Arax from the LA Times. I know who you are, and I want to tell your story." And I said, "Listen, I don't want no one to know my story. I don't want to put my picture out there. I'm keeping a low profile until this is all over with." He goes, "Richard, it doesn't work like that." He goes, "Do you realize what you're up against?" He goes, "You're not only up against those officers, you're up against politicians."
Yeah,
that's
worse.
The politicians and the construction companies that now are going to be halted from building new prisons because you're exposing them from promoting this violence and pumping fear in the public to get the money to build more prisons. You're exposing it all. And I'm like, wow. So Mark did my piece. Mark did the piece, front page of the LA Times. And now everybody knows who I am. It's in the Fresno Bee. It's in the Chronicle, San Francisco. And so then all of a sudden I had to relocate up to Vacaville. And that's when I started working in Solano because of the threats that were coming through. I would go to work and they show up at my house and they're banging on the windows with my wife and my daughter in the closet hiding. And they're banging like they're coming in. And she's calling 911 and the cops are coming. And the cops would see footprints all in the planters. And, I was putting my family through hell. I was willing to take on the fight, but it wasn't fair for my wife and my daughter. So I said, you know what, I'll move up there. My wife's father lived in Napa. She could be at home with her dad, with my daughter, and I would work at Solano. So I get up in Solano, and little do I know, the word's already traveled. They know I'm coming. They know I'm there. I get to the adjustment center in the shoe, the little ad seg, and those officers didn't know who I was. I walk in to work a shift, and they're like, "Hey, guess what? You're going to get to see your yard fight today." I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "Do you know what's going on down at Corcoran?" I'm like, "Do you know what's going on?"
Yeah.
So once the word got out, I left Solano on stress disability leave, and the warden there, her name was Peggy Kernan, and she worked with me at Mule Creek, right? She was an associate warden at Mule Creek, so she knew me. So now she's the warden at Corcoran. I'm out on stress disability leave. The state is now, for workers' comp reasons, going to send me to state hacks to try to minimize why I can't do my job anymore and to get them out, make them retire, get them out of here, right?
Yeah.
I'm saying I'm 30-some years old. I know how to be a cop. That's it. There's no reason for me to get another job. I don't have any psychological problems because I did the right thing. So the state psychiatrist comes back and tells the Department of Corrections, this guy, there's nothing wrong with him. If you find a job for him as an officer outside the walls until the trial is over with, he'll be fine. The department came back and said, we don't have any jobs on the outside of the walls for correctional officers. Well, my attorneys knew you could be on outside crews, you could work at the academy, you could be on transportation. They wanted me out. So I filed a civil lawsuit against the Department of Corrections, and I ended up putting my retirement in. They were forcing me to retire, and I filed a civil lawsuit. The indictments still have not come down. So now the pendulum was way over here where the feds were going to get the state. Now years are passing, and the pendulum is starting to come over here because the state is now pumping in millions of dollars to do investigations on the allegations that are in the paper about Corcoran. So we had over 1,000 shootings with those block guns. We had the highest death toll in the United States. Guess who they went after? That state. They came after Caruso, the whistleblower, because they wanted to try to discredit me, right?
Yeah. I knew that was coming, Rich. I knew that was coming.
So here, for years, I'm stealing stuff out of that prison still for the FBI and the U.S. attorney, and he's slamming the paper down saying, no more media, no more media. And I got Mike Wallace, 60 Minutes, getting a hold of the U.S. attorney and saying, where the hell are the indictments? Why is it taking years to indict, right? Well, the reason it's taking years, Hal, is because it's copland. That U.S. attorney knows this is going to be a shit show. Voir your voir dire is the community of Copland. They're not going to get a conviction on these cops, right? So I go down there, and all of a sudden, we're about 3 years in, and the U.S. attorney says, hey, we want to meet with Richard at the Pyramid Building in San Francisco, and with my civil attorneys. And I told my wife, it's done. They're going to indict the officers, right? They're going to indict. And I'm like, okay, I've lived this life. I've worked for these guys. Hell, I got them on tape recorder and talking about the high-speed chase. I would tape record my conversations. I got them talking about high-speed chase, talking that I've never been a target of any investigation with the FBI, that I'm a hero, that if it was them, they would have threw all that evidence in a garbage can. They would have never turned it over and done what I did because of the threat and the sacrifices that I got them all on tape. We go to the Pyramid Building. It's been 3.5 years I've been living this. I sit down, my wife's crying. It's finally coming to an end. The U.S. attorney comes in. The 2 FBI agents that were with me in the car come in. They sit down. My civil attorneys are there. And the U.S. attorney sits across from me. And he says, Richard, first of all, I want to thank you for everything that you've done for us. Yeah. He goes, but as you know, the Department of Corrections has done a parallel investigation. I go, does that mean you guys have worked with them to get to invest? No, we didn't work with them. They did their own investigation. I said, okay. They go, well, they sent us this letter. And in this letter, it says that back in 1996, you set a child molester out there on one of those yards, and you shot him with the block gun. I said, what? I looked at my civil attorney. My civil attorney pulls out the investigation they did back then in 1996, in which that child molester started a fight on the yard, and I shot him with the block gun and stopped the fight. But now the state cleared me back then. But now, 3 years later, now they're saying, oh, he sent him out there to shoot him, right? I'm like, I go, you don't see what they're trying to do. They're trying to tarnish your witness.
You know what? You were surprised? And you were surprised, Richard?
Hell, you're not surprised. So you know what the U.S. attorney said? He goes, Richard, I'm offering you 3 to 7 years in a federal prison right now. He goes, you can think about it. My wife looked at me, my U.S. attorney. I go, are you fucking kidding me? I've been working for you guys for fucking 4 years. I go, you're going to put me in jail? I go, you're going to believe them? And I go, oh my God, my attorneys were looking at them like, you scumbags. You're in bed now. Now they're in bed with the department saying, we're going to go after these officers, but we'll get Caruso too for you. Right? Oh, yes. So now I'm sitting there like this going, oh my God. Why? What are these? I'm just this officer trying to do the right thing. This Marine, this kid that comes from this nice Italian family trying to think that justice is pure and that we'll all work together and do the right thing. And they're all fucking dirty. They're all dirty.
Yeah.
Republicans, Democrats, everybody, they're all dirty. So I'm not now. I got to find an attorney. I have no money. My civil attorney hooked me up with a high-profile attorney out of San Francisco, and I told him I got tape recordings of them saying I've never been a target, saying I'm a hero. And he goes, "You got those tapes?" I gave him the tapes to my attorney, and he took them down, and he went down to the U.S. Attorney's office and wanted to have a meeting. This is before they indicted the 8.
Yes.
And now my attorney's in there with the U.S. attorney and the 2 FBI agents, and he's looking at the FBI saying, "Didn't you tell my client he was a hero? He was never a target. That you would have thrown everything in the garbage." And the U.S. attorney says, "Stop." He realizes Richie's got tapes.
Yeah.
And he tells my attorney to step.
I love it.
And the U.S. attorney steps out and says, "We're not going to indict Richard." And he goes, "You're goddamn right. You're not going to indict Richard.
Oh.
No, he's the one, the reason for this. He's the one that's caused change in this department. And how dare you do that, right?" So I go back to Napa, and I'm working out in Vallejo in the gym, and I get word that the head of the Democratic Party in Sacramento, Senator Richard Polanco, Bustamante was lieutenant governor. Well, Polanco was the head of the Democratic Party. I'm a Republican, and he's trying to get a hold of me. So I get back to home and I call the Capitol, and he says, "Richard, my name is Senator Polanco. We are going to have hearings on Corcoran, and we are going to peel back the onions, and we're going to expose them, and we are going to bring about change in the Department of Corrections." And he goes, "But we need you. We need you to come up here and meet with us. Show us the evidence that you got. Tell us the story of what you've done, and tell us where to look in these reports, and what witnesses to call."
Yes.
So I call my civil attorneys, and they said, "No, you can't go up there. We have your federal case is filed, but do you know what summary judgment is?"
Do I? Yes, of course.
Okay, so summary judgment is that hurdle that if you get that to go in front of a judge, I don't know if that judge is a Republican or Democrat. He could throw my case out.
Damn
So
right.
I haven't even got to that point yet. So I told my civil attorneys, "Fuck you. These Democrats are looking out for me. I'm going to go secretly meet with them at the Capitol, and I'm going to hand feed them everything. I'm going to hand feed them the whole shebang." So I go up there to the Capitol for 3 days in Sacramento, and I meet with all the Adam Schiff, Polanco, all of them.
Oh, interesting.
And I'm meeting, I'm feeding them all the information. And now I got to go and testify in front of the Senate. So they have the hearings. I come in and testify. All the bad guys, the officers, not convicts, are sitting behind me, glaring at me. They want my head on, but they're scared of me.
Yeah.
Because I'm not a coward. You know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, they're not going to come up face to face. So I'm in there testifying. And as a result of the hearings, I think it went a week and a half, 2 weeks. I could send you some clips. We changed the whole department. It changed the shooting policy. It changed the academy. They extended the academy. Now there's psychological evaluations for new hires. The integrated shoe policy stopped. So that means the shooting stopped. So I achieved what I was going to achieve. Fuck the feds. Fuck the state. Let me go on with my life. I achieved what I wanted to achieve.
I'd like to jump in here. Ladies and gentlemen, this is exactly what the Crisis Victory Show is about. When someone experiences an extreme crisis event and they come out on the other side in a humanitarian basis, like this gentleman and now a brother to me has done for other people. And if you've never been a convict, you've never been an inmate, you can't possibly imagine the stigma that goes with that and how you're treated when you're inside that system and how once you're outside that system. So Richard, truly my hat's off to you. What a bold move you took to do that. And you know what? You have saved lives, and you did change a program. And now guys like me that broke the law have to go do our time. They're able to go in there, get their time done, and get the hell out of there and rebuild life. And man, I'll love you forever for that. And I thank you forever for that.
Brother, I appreciate that, and it's a common theme that I get from convicts that I meet on the street, and I tell the convict, I said, "Brother, let me just say I appreciate that respect and that love." I said, but it was all about a moral compass for me because I was going to kill somebody.
Yes,
I was going to kill another human being, and it needed to stop. So
well,
now,
I know how cops are in the system like that, brother, especially in those levels. And let me tell you something, it's a very risky move to turn against that organization. So I know
And
exactly.
as a Marine, brother, as a Marine, to take to understand now I'm going to be alienated from my family, my law enforcement family.
Yeah.
But what happened was the good cops and the
Yeah,
good people in the
exactly.
public, they put a circle. They were supporting me. If I would have been abandoned by society
Yeah.
as, say, a rat that got his hand caught in the cookie jar and now he's telling on his buddies to save his ass, if I would have been projected as that, I wouldn't have been able to psychologically hold it together. I
Well,
was getting
Richard, you and I both know there's a lot of good COs, a lot of good correction officers in the system, and they don't like it when they have to work dirty, like you were explaining to my
because they pay for the dirty behavior.
you
What
damn
about
right.
that kid coming out of the? What about that kid coming out of the academy today in
Yeah.
2024? And you got a convict from back in the day that remembers one of
Yeah.
his homies being killed by a CO.
That's
Those
right.
convicts have long memories,
You're
right?
damn right we do. It never
So,
goes away, brother.
so here I am up in the Bay Area. I'm working out in Vallejo. I just testified in front of the Senate. I hear that they're gearing up for this trial, the big trial. They indicted 8 of them, and they're gearing up for it down in Fresno. And I saw what a circus it was with the feds. I saw what a circus it was with the state. But there's going to be an election, and it's Dan Lundgren, the
Yeah.
Republican, is running against Gray Davis. So the Republicans wanted me dead for what I did. Gray Davis gets elected. I'm at home now. I get a phone call from the governor's office. And here my attorney said, don't talk to those senators. They're going to use you up. They're not going to help you. Well, it's a year later, and I'm getting a call from the newly elected governor, Gray Davis.
Yes.
And he tells me, he says, Richard, he goes, I'm going to make you whole. I'm ordering the Department of Corrections to settle your lawsuit against them. And not only that, I'm going to give you my personal attorney to sit at that table with you, with your attorneys against them. And I'm ordering them to settle this case. But
Wow.
please, Richard, go on with your life. Make a change out there in the world. Just don't rub our face in it every chance you get. And I said, sir, you don't know how much I thank you. So we go to that pyramid building again. And here I am with my attorneys and the attorneys that I've been dealing with for the last 2 years of depositions in my civil case are sitting across from us. And they're looking at me like, that little fucker can call the governor. Because
Yeah.
I got the governor's attorney sitting with me. So they start throwing numbers back and forth. And that the state says, hey, we gave him his retirement. We gave him his medical. He has nothing else coming. And then my attorney stands up and says, hey, my client's in his late 30s. All he knows is being a cop. From 18 being the Marines. Why should he have to grab a Burger King uniform because the state says he's not able to be a police officer anymore? And they're writing numbers down and they're all frantic. And they send us in separate rooms and they come back and the state wanted to give me $300 or some $1,000. And I'm like, I laughed at that. I said, no, that's not happening. And then they come back with 600 or some thousand. I said, that's not happening. I know my attorney's going to take 33 1/3.
Yeah.
So I finally said, you know what? I want over $1 million. I want to walk away with over $1 million. And the state says, we got to call the governor Davis for this. They called Governor Davis and they said, he gets on the phone. He said, Richard, this is a big number, but you deserve it. He goes, I just wanted you to know that, you know, how much I appreciated what you did for us in those hearings and changing the system. And this is me giving back to you. And then the next day in the Los Angeles Times, his whistleblower gets largest amount ever given to a whistleblower in the state of California at that time. So now here the feds are watching this. The FBI is watching this. Wait a minute. You gave him the largest amount. You said he was dirty. You said that he shot a child molester. Stay watching, right?
I love it.
So the feds are like, wait a minute. We just got played by the fucking state. The Department of Corrections played us, right?
Yeah.
So I'm coming back from the gym in Napa, and there's a white car sitting outside my house. Guy gets out and says, FBI. He says, you know, we got the trial starting next week, and we want you to come down. We want you to testify. I said, fuck you. I said, you got my grand jury testimony. I go, you wanted to put me in jail for 7 years for something I didn't do on hearsay from the state that you knew they were tarnishing me. And I was putting my life on the line every day for 3 years for you people.
Yeah, you were.
And so I said, fuck you. He goes, Richard, we're going to subpoena you. I go, I don't care. You have my grand jury testimony. So I go inside my house and I call Mike Wallace. I call CBS Evening News and I go, they said CBS Evening News. I go, can I please talk to Mike Wallace? They go, who's this? I said, Richard Caruso. He gets on the phone because 60 Minutes had already done my piece twice. So he gets on the phone. I said, Mike, they want me to come down to that trial. It's going to be a circus. I go, you see in the paper, they already picked a jury. They got people on the jury that have family members that work at the prison.
Jesus.
I'm not going to go. I go, it's going to be a circus. So he goes, Richard, you were the one that started this. He goes, you got to see it through. We're going to be in the front row. 60 Minutes is going to be there. The LA Times, San Francisco, everyone's going to be there. They got your back. Wow. He goes, you couldn't come to us and just talk about high-speed chases without credible evidence. He goes, Richard, you played the tapes for us. We've heard them. You're telling the truth. So I said, okay. So I go down. I drive down to the federal courthouse. I drive down there, and I get there. I get out of my car to go into the federal court. All the cameras. Here, he's coming, right? I get in there. They take the defense wants a sidebar. They see me coming. So the defense attorneys go up there, and the U.S. attorney goes up there, and the judge says, what's going on? He goes, they're going to call Caruso. They go, yeah. And the defense says, Your Honor, if he brings up $1.7 million, we're going to ask for a mistrial. Yeah. And then the judge looked at the U.S. attorney and said, okay, I'll agree with that. Tell your client, do not bring up $1.7 million. But, Mr. Defense Attorney, if you bring it up, Mr. U.S. Attorney, you can follow. So they come in and tell me in the room, the U.S. Attorney, don't talk about your lawsuit. Don't talk about your lawsuit. I said, okay, that's fine. So I get up there on the stand. And now think of how absurd this is. The state of California, the Union for the Correctional Peace Officer, they pay millions of dollars for attorneys to represent these indicted, criminally indicted officers. So taxpayers' money is being paid to represent these indicted officers, right? I've had to pay out of my own pocket for my fight the feds and to fight these people.
And you're the good guy. And you're the good guy.
I'm up there on the stand, Hal. I'm up there on the stand. Jesus. And all of a sudden, the defense attorney doesn't even want to talk about what's going on in Corcoran. He says he holds up a contract. He says, Richard, do you know what this is? I said, yes, it's a contract. He goes, Richard, who's the contract from? I said, the contract is from Paramount Pictures. Paramount Pictures, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that's what this is all about. It's about a movie deal for Mr. Caruso.
It's knew that was coming.
It's about Paramount Pictures, right? And so he looks at me and he goes, high-speed chase? Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Caruso said that the state chased him in a high-speed chase and they were scared. Well, we're going to put that FBI agent up here tomorrow. We're going to show you he's lying. This is all about his movie. Right?
Of course.
And he looks at me and he points to a number in the contract. He says, Richard, how much is that number right there? I said, $760,000. He goes, $760,000 you'll make if this movie gets made. Richard, that's probably the most money you have ever made. And I looked at him, I looked at the U.S. attorney, and I said, well, they gave me more than that over there. They gave me more than that. And he realized, oh, fuck. And the jury's like, what do you mean you got more than that? Mike Wallace is looking at the attorney. The defense attorney goes and sit down. Mike Wallace is looking at the U.S. attorney. Stand up, follow up. What's that mean? Never stood up. Never cleaned up the question of what's that mean? What do you mean they just gave him almost $2 million? Why? Because he's credible, right?
He's credible. That's exactly.
They wanted it to go away, hell. They knew that if these officers are found guilty, it's going to open up Pandora's box of lawsuits from these families all throughout the country that were injured, killed, or maimed at Corcoran State Prison.
Absolutely.
And this needed to go away. This needed to go away, right? So here, I go back to Fresno, and the next morning, Mike Wallace is still there at the trial with Mark Arax, the press, and the LA Times. And they put the female officer of the FBI up there that was in the car with me. And they go, Lee, Agent Murphy, high-speed chase. Richard talks about this high-speed chase. She goes, well, not like I said, it's been 3.5 years. She goes, well, my partner likes to drive fast. And she minimized everything, right? So Mark Arax goes right up to her after she gets off the stand and said, I heard you talk to Richard Caruso on the telephone, scared as shit that you were getting chased by the state investigators. But Mark said her face turned white and she ran over to the U.S. attorney. I called the U.S. attorney on the phone and left a message. I said, you know what? You guys are just as dirty as the state of California. I said, I was just a young guy with a belief in my government, a belief in my agencies that I work for, that we were out to do the right thing and to protect the public. I said, but you're just as filthy as the criminals. And I go, how dare you let her get up there and lie about that high-speed chase and make me look that credible? And I hung up. And he wrote me a letter. And the letter said, Richard, first of all, I want to thank you for everything you did for us. Without you, this change would not have come about. And as far as the high-speed chase, two people could be at the same place at the same time with different accounts of the incident and still be telling the truth. And I'm saying to myself, come on.
Yeah.
Someone's lying.
You know the drill.
Yeah, hell, you know the drill. So I'm going to end this up and let you know, because there's a lot more stories inside the prison of violence. And I mean, on the weight pile, and I'm standing there.
You know what we'll have to do? We're going to have to do another interview sometime, Richard. Yeah. I would love to share that with you. And I want to tell you,
I got the stories of violence, but I'm going to end with this and talk to you about karma. And this is something that you've kind of touched on during this interview. Is I came forward in 1994, and 3 years ago, I was in the jungle outside Los Angeles by Disneyland. I don't know if you saw the movie Training Day, but Training Day, there's a scene where they're in the jungle, Denzel Washington, and the gang members got Ethan Hawke in the tub, and they're going to kill him.
Movie, yeah.
They're going to kill him. They pull the wallet out, right? How do you get this wallet? I'm right there, and I'm doing something for Prince Harry for veteran advocacy. I'm helping veterans, and I'm packing up my car, and this Hispanic guy comes up on a bicycle, and he's in his mid-50s, and he gets off his bike, and I got this bald white boy. What's he do? He goes, "What are you doing in our neighborhood?" I go, I'm doing something for veterans. He goes, right on, homeboy. He goes, my nephew was a veteran. And guess what I see, Hal?
What's that,
I see the handprint of the Mexican mafia on his chest. Oh. And I take a bladed stance. And I said, you done time in Cali? He goes, yeah. I go, where? He says, Corcoran. I said, yeah, me too. He goes, when? I go, 90s, late 80s. He goes, me too. He goes, what's your name? He's got shades on, slingshot. He goes, what's your name? I said, my name's Caruso. Hell, the Reaper was standing right in front of me. Yeah. And he put his glasses down like this, Caruso. And he stepped forward, and I was just willing to take what came, and he grabbed me, and he kissed me on my cheek. Yeah. And he goes, do you know what your name means in this neighborhood? I go, what? He goes, do you know the sons and the fathers that you saved that would have never came home? That are in there, and I couldn't believe that convict mentality that they don't forget.
Oh, it's real, brother. It's real. Yeah, you heard how emotional I got with you in a few seconds at the beginning of this, because I'm totally and completely aware of just exactly what you were confronted with and what you were facing as a result of that choice that you made. But I want to cut it off here, because I want to have you back again as another guest if you would honor me by doing that. Because I'm honored too. And brother, you guys are in the face of that hurricane down there. Please be safe, Richard, and nothing but love and respect to you, your family. I speak, and I know I speak for a lot of ex-convicts on knowing exactly what you did. And there's nothing safer than a good cop, because a good cop will also give us that little bit of leverage in life when we're in there doing hard freaking time and dealing with, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So nothing but love and respect for you, and I really appreciate you being on my show today, Richard. Please come back.
I love you, but you know why I love you? I love you because I knew you really wanted to be a Marine, but you went in the Army.
Yeah. Well, my brother did 23 years in the Corps. He's a Purple Heart recipient. I have nothing but respect for the Corps. Simplify, but I'm airborne, brother. I got to stay with my paratroops. Yeah. Hey. Thanks, Richard, for coming on my show. Thank you so very much. And this is an amazing interview, just amazing. And please consider coming back again. I'd like to
let me know when. You just let me know when.
Nothing but
Semper Fi, brother. Semper Fi.
Do or die. All the best to you, brother. Take care.
Excellent.
Okay, folks. Well, that wraps up another episode today. And I'd like to take this moment to thank each and every one of you for taking your time to catch our show. Now, if you like these shows, I would ask that you would please hit like, share, and subscribe. It's so important to us that we get these messages out, and we understand that these are graphic, almost toxic interviews. But, this is the kind of impact that we feel is needed in order to make sure that people understand the significance of the problems that we are confronted within our own country and around the globe. So I'm going to say at this time that I love you all. God bless you all. Hasta luego, y vaya con Dios, and go.